welcome to the Innermost Ramblings of Fiona, a podcast. I'm Fiona, surprise, surprise, and this is a space where I've decided to release some of the things that come from my innermost parts, my ramblings, as a podcast. It's been born from this space of discovering that I really like being out of voice memo, that a lot of the time I don't know my experience until I can talk about it. And then as I speak, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of truth in that. Wow, that was really pivotal for me. Wow. And yeah, I want to share that with the world. There's multiple reasons that I've started this podcast, and yeah, that's one of them. The connection piece that voice memos allows me to have with other people on a personal level, and now I'm wanting to release that at another level as a podcast, and also attending 12 steps and just the sharing of experience, strength and hope as people share unedited has been really helpful for me, because I just learn so much from listening to people talk about their experience. I can identify myself in that experience and learn from them. And again, other podcasts that do the same thing, where I just listen to someone's experience and I'm like, wow, I am taking so much away from someone else sharing honestly where they're at and how they experience the world, what their truth is. Maybe it's not my truth, but I can then work out what my truth is. So welcome to this podcast as I ramble, and I hope that it is a place that you can find yourself in, even if not in my experiences, but start to work out your own truth. Thank you for joining me. May you enjoy. From my heart to yours. A disclaimer about today's podcast. I have been very apprehensive about releasing it. I recorded it over a week ago, and I've listened to it a couple of times and just been like, oh my freaking goodness, what am I doing? I am terrified of judgment, and that just tells me that I'm still judging myself a lot. I'm terrified. I'm apprehensive and uncomfortable, I think, more than terrified. But like, what happens if people I know listen to me and then see me interacting with food? Like, that's this projection that I have, that I need to protect myself somehow. But I know from past experience that when I start wrapping words around things, that's when the shift changes. That's when the shifts happen. That's when change is allowed in. When I start speaking about it and acknowledging to myself, there's a point in this podcast where I'm like, I've never admitted this out loud to anyone. Hang on, I've never fully let this into myself as an acknowledgement. I've never admitted it to myself. So you get to witness that moment of like, wow, this is a thing. Yeah. So I am releasing this with quite a bit of trepidation, but also just this, like, this is part of the healing process. This is part of my journey. If you choose to listen, good for you. Again, this is for me as much as for the world. So thank you. I also mentioned autism in passing and feel like I didn't do heaps of justice to that topic. So I will do I think I will do an entire episode on autism at some point.
Well, this is where the rubber meets the road, I suppose. I'm terrified of being honest about how I feel, how I experience the world. I tell myself I shouldn't feel the way that I feel a lot of the time. It's really windy, so I'm hoping this recording is good. landing. How do I feel? I feel like I have been avoiding myself all day. I also feel like I'm waiting for something outside of myself to pass. And that is how anxiety shows up for me a lot of the time. Like, I just get so focused on outside. My energy is all outside of me. My energy is very scattered. I signed up to do this challenge, 5-day detox challenge from dieting culture, with Colleen from The Society, and it is bringing up a lot of stuff, man. I've never said this out loud. No. Okay, I'll say what I was going to say. I've never said this out loud to anyone. I've spent a lot of time denying this to myself. Denying the fact that food is a constant point of struggle and stress and anxiety for me. Which is then tied up in how I look in my body. And I don't want to admit any of that. But the only way to heal from it is to let it fully into my body and acknowledge that I have been underfeeding myself for possibly all my life. I like the feeling of being a little empty. However, it has got to a point where my health is deteriorating. I read a study that was done around they did a study on like starvation and what it does to the body. So there was like these healthy men, and they came in and they tracked their health and stuff. They had to be fit and healthy and mentally healthy. And at the end of that, they so at a period of time, where they just tracked what they did and how they came and went and lived their daily life. After that, they halved the amount of food that they were taking, like the calories that they were consuming. And I think they did that for like 8 weeks, 2 months. And then there was a refeeding, and they watched what happened, and it affected them, and like they became scarce. There was a scarcity mindset that entered. They were protective of their food. They got paranoid about wasting food. Like, these are all things that I really struggle with. There's just never enough. I imposed the restriction on myself, and I'm obsessed with concentration camps, with the wars, and I don't really understand why. I think possibly past life stuff, or I don't know, there is something, like, I'm always reading a book about the war. Or I have been. For the last couple years, actually. It just fascinates me. And I wonder if that's, I don't know, I've often looked at my body and thought, ugh, you look like you came out of a concentration camp. And yet, there's this element of like wanting to look like that. And I don't understand that. But just to understand what starvation does, like, it drives me to act in ways that I don't have control over, because my body is trying to just get the nutrients that she needs to survive, to live. And I live in survival mode all the time. And I just wonder if that's it. The thing that has drawn me to... Sorry, I'm going to finish that thought. If that's what is actually causing survival mode for me, like not enough nutrients to fuel my body and function, like I'm just always getting by. And I, like, one of the things is being teary all the time. That's me. I can't seem to cope. I find relationships really difficult. I don't know what to say. Concentration's very difficult. Like, all these things that I'm like, I've had chronic fatigue for the last 10 years, but maybe I've just not been feeding myself enough food. Like, how simple is that? And yet it's not as simple as like, okay, we'll just eat. Just eat. The reason I've come to this place is because I want to live in my body intuitively. Like, I want to do what feels good. And for so long that didn't even make sense to me, because I had no concept. And I've started to feel that. I've started to feel what it's like to live in my body and have all my energy inside of my body, not outside and floofing around everywhere, or up in my head. I want to live intuitively. I want to live primally. I want to live, and I think I am in part, like, this primal need for food, and I hate and shame my body for it. Like, I've demonized my hunger. It's like hunger is the enemy. It's an inconvenience to be hungry, which is hard to admit, actually, but also so, like, yeah, that is how I live. No wonder I'm so thingy, like, toey around food. And it feels good to actually admit all of that out loud to myself. And I'm going one step further in one fast sweep. It's kind of like, I mean, this is how I voice moment myself, so all of a sudden I'm just releasing it to everyone else. Kind of being like, no one's really gonna listen. Yeah. Anyway, back to this intuitive living. Like, I want to learn to eat intuitively, to feed my body intuitively, but I've repressed my hunger and full signals for so long. I don't know what they feel like unless I'm really, 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 really hungry or over full, and that's going to take some time to get to know. But there's this knowing in me that this coming home to my body that I desire, like, with all of my being, that I am drawn to, that my soul came here to. Like, she chose this body. I chose this body. We chose this journey, and this is part of my embodiment. This is part of learning to love this vessel that I'm in. No matter how she looks, no matter how she feels, no matter what she's eaten or hasn't eaten in a day. I know without a shadow of a doubt that for now this is what it is to be intuitive, to learn to be intuitive. Like, it's the same thing as trusting my intuition on which person I want to be friends with, which person I don't want to be friends with, which energy, like, what feels good to do with my time, like, it's all the same thing. And this is the place that's drawing the most energy away from me. So it's also the place that I need to lovingly focus the most energy on. I make a lot of noise that isn't words, that aren't words. Because I know that helps. But it's not usual, or it hasn't been in my experience with people that I've talked to. That is a side note. Anyway, that brings me to this other thought about, like, let's just jump right in right now. I was diagnosed with autism in October last year, and I haven't really made that a thing mostly lately. I'm still kind of processing it, but I just wonder if a lot of that is like my struggle with relationships and not understanding how they work and always being overthinking. I think some of that might be this scarcity mode that I live in, like, well, one, not trusting that people would like me for me, if I don't have anything to say. I don't always follow social cues, or I don't get like the thing of conversation. I can monologue quite well, which is very typical of an autistic person, but yeah, I just wonder how much more, like, I'm working on communication tools and authentic relating, but I just wonder how much have I stolen from myself by not feeding myself. Yeah. And I feel like that's where it's at today. Like, I'm uber thankful for this group, this Facebook group, where everyone's just sharing it how it is, and I'm not the only one who struggled with these patterns around food, with these relationships to food and to my body. Yeah, like I said, I know that as I heal this relationship and refeed myself, like, that could take months to get my body into a place where she trusts that I'm not gonna restrict, that we're not going into famine again. Like, I've always prided myself on self-control, but I'm so over-controlling, and I think that shows up in every area of my life. So I think even just this podcast and trusting that me rambling and not editing a thing is okay, is enough, is what I need, is what the world is gonna appreciate from me. This authentic expression thing, that when I let go of control, I'm not so exhausted. Like, when I let go, I'm free. And I didn't realize how many places I'm holding on, and it's like slowly unraveling. I'm seeing more and more places, and yeah, honestly, the last couple of days have just been like with Colleen sharing stuff and others sharing stuff, and me being like, oh wow, me too. I do that too. Wow, I see that in myself. Wow, I do this. That's the first part of healing. Very uncomfortable part, because now I can see clearly, but it also is like, okay, I don't want to live like this anymore. My controlling is killing me and isolating me, and yeah. And I think that is me done for now. I don't know how to finish this.
I just wanted to get really concise with some of the things that I identified as in my own behaviours around the way that I interact with food as a result of reading the starvation experiment report, and how the participants' behaviour changed, and me being like, oh wow, that's something I definitely relate to. One of the biggest ones that surprised me, but is definitely a massive part of my behaviour, is recipe books and reading recipe books for pleasure, collecting them. Like, apparently one person collected over 100 recipe books during the time that this research was going on, and hadn't really had an interest in recipes before. And it's definitely something, like, I'm always looking for new recipes, and I do cook quite intuitively and enjoy it, but there's an added layer of obsession, I think, that's come from not feeding myself well, noticing that I don't know what my hunger and full cues are, and so I'll often eat past fullness, because my body just simply doesn't trust me when I'm trust that I'm gonna feed her, or know that I'm gonna feed her when she's hungry next. There's this panic around food that I'm gonna miss out, being overly protective, and my whole day being centered around what time I need to eat, or having rules about what time I should eat, which is being born partly from culture, partly from the fact that I don't know my hunger cues, and so I'm like, well, I just will always eat at this time during the day. And yeah, just being overly controlling, overly focused on food. They mentioned that people that participated in this changed their whole life path to become chefs or become involved in the food industry in one way or another, whereas before they weren't interested, because it's such a preoccupation, even if subconsciously, and just the inability to concentrate on anything other than food. Noticing how often, now that I've been paying attention for a couple of weeks, it's almost like I'm trying not to pay attention to food, and that becomes a subconscious thing that I'm doing instead. Yeah, definitely uncomfortable to observe in myself. I think I mentioned this, but there's a distaste or an uncomfortableness about wasting food, bringing the length of time, expanding the length of time that a meal would take. So it might take minutes to eat food, and I would want to draw it out as much as possible. I also really like to use spices and salts and flavors to enhance the meal, which was another thing that came up. And there was a definite shift in the participants around their introverted, extroverted experiences. So many that were extroverted became introverted. There was an increase in anxiety, and just to look at all of this and see the damage that not feeding myself has done potentially, is huge. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and kind of list that out with a bit more clarity for myself, so I can hear it spoken. But also, yeah, if you're interested to read that report, I'd highly recommend it. It's very, very interesting what not getting enough food can do to one. there you have it. Another episode of the innermost ramblings of Fiona. Thanks for coming along for the ride and listening to things that are dear to me, close to my heart, sometimes uncomfortable to share. I hope there's been something that you could identify and take away, or that you just got to know me a little better. If you would like to find me, I am on Instagram at @Iam_embodied expression, or I am Fiona __, or you can email me, or you can download the Anchor app and voice memo me, which is kind of exciting. Yeah, and I'll leave it there. May you have a good evening, morning, day. From my heart to yours. Ashe.